when I was a full-time employee, I did that as well. I set boundaries. That was one of the sections in my book, is setting boundaries. Because if you don't set boundaries, if you make yourself available 24/7, 365, people will take it from you. Your employer will take it from you. If you're helpful to other people, if you're a giver, not a taker, people will take all of your time. And so I like to be a giver, but I do it within the parameters that I set.
Welcome back to the Money, the Mindset, and the Mentoring podcast. Today we have with us Carl Grant, the author of How to Live the Abundant Life. Also a serial entrepreneur with many, many different skills underneath him and many different successes underneath him. We have so many things to talk about, the different events that you've run. I mean, I was watching some of the videos of the stuff that went viral that you created, which was pretty sick. And then we get on this call and you're like, oh, I'm doing this. And then, wait, what's happening with that? Oh, that one's gone now. Now I've got this one. So there's just so many things on the go. And I just want to get into your world, get into your mind, get into what really drives you. So welcome to the show, Carl. I appreciate it.
Steve, it's awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let's talk a little bit about you. So first of all, what is like keeping you passionate today? We talked earlier about the idea and I'm going to throw this out there. Hopefully it's all right. You're 57. You've done so many different things in your life. What's driving you to continue to keep at the high pace that you are at today?
Well, Steve, I've got a beautiful wife and 5 awesome kids, and 3 of them still live with me. So, I didn't know how that would look when I had them, but they stick around longer these days, which is cool. They're welcome to stay. I've got a 20-year-old, a 26-year-old, and a 27-year-old living at home. My married son lives about a half hour away. He works with me on one of the projects I'm working on, and then my youngest daughter is an investment banker in New York. She's actually in Florida today picking up our new dog. We have a new dog coming home. That's pretty exciting. Name's Bella.
Now for you, home is Austin, Texas, correct?
Austin, Texas. Yeah, I've been here 4 years now. Yeah, I came from Northern Virginia.
Yeah.
I know you're in Canada, so you might be able to relate. I wanted to get out of the cold.
Well, whenever I go to get out of the cold, I love going down to Austin. Austin is the heart of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's got some of the best people down there training, so it's a beautiful place. Food's great. There's that barbecue place right across on the river there. What is it called?
There's so many barbecue places here, Steve. There's so many.
This one was one of the best ones. I gotta think about it. It was a name, but oh my gosh, that was the craziest place.
You talking about the county line?
You go in. No, it's like literally it's right across the river from downtown. Oh. And
I don't think I've been there.
Don't remember. Anyways, I love the food, the energy, the vibe is really great, and all the little scooters bumping around town is so much fun too. So
I've seen less of them lately. I don't know what's happened. They're still there, but not the mobs of those things you used to see.
Oh, you know what? I think it's when conferences come in. That's when the mobs show up.
Yeah. So when I was trying to convince my youngest son to move here, he wanted to go scootering around town, and so up until then I thought those things were annoying. This is 4 years ago, but I did it with him, and I had a blast. I almost got killed. My gosh, those things are dangerous.
That's what makes them so fun.
Yeah.
Freedom isn't in safety. Freedom is in doing the things that make you a little bit feel unsafe. So.
Oh, I agree. I got my private pilot's license not that long ago, and talk about an unsafe feeling. That and jumping out of airplanes. Those are some adrenaline drivers.
Jumping out of airplanes would make you feel that way. My only really close experience on the private license was I had a client of mine. He was 72 years old, and we're flying in his plane. It's one of those de Havilland Beavers, the float planes. Yeah. And we're taking off, and I could hear the tower saying he's not allowed to take off. And he's like, they don't know what you're talking about. They said they think the ceiling's too low or something. Okay. And he just took off.
It's dangerous, man.
He's a one-eyed bandit. It was amazing.
My biggest thrill now is when I get on my jet ski. I have a jet ski, and I'll go 60 miles per hour. At least it's water all around me, and I can recover from a spill. So I don't know.
I think at the jet ski at 60 miles an hour, I think that's going to give you a little bit of a bump and a little bit of a bruise. So.
But it's not like falling out of the sky onto the ground, right? At least there's water around you. I have yet to. I don't want to jinx myself, but I've yet to flip it or do anything to come off the jet ski. Now my kids have. but I haven't.
Yeah.
It's
Well, one of
dangerous.
the things that
Good. There's a kid who I don't want to tell the whole gory detail, but there was a death from a jet ski right out in the lake behind my house. It can be very dangerous if you're not careful.
not careful about it. No, for sure. I think, but it can be a heck of a lot of fun too. So
It is. It's a blast. I'm going out this weekend. It's going to be beautiful this weekend. Low 90s.
Well, so we look at what I sort of sense from our last conversation, what I sense from our conversation right now is the idea that you have a really good focus on what's important to you. And I don't feel like the sense that you're somebody who says business, 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 numbers, 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 like the Lego movie. You're more into the idea of you creating focus on all of the things that are important in your life. And that's one thing that when I read your book that I kind of got out of that is that this is not just a business book. It starts off with the idea that I should have wrote a business book, but guess what? It affects actually all aspects of my life, not just business. So I got to kind of talk about those things too. So talk to me a little bit about that.
So I knew I had a book in me, and when I first thought about writing a book, I thought about what I did. So for 20 years, I was global head of business development for an international law firm. I grew the revenues from 310 million to over 2 billion as head of business development there, and that's a pretty interesting thing to do, but it's kind of a niche thing. And so to do that, it takes certain skill sets, certain people skills. And, I was the first person to do that type of a role, both at PricewaterhouseCoopers and then in the law firm world. And I, I kind of defined that whole business career. And I thought I was going to write about that. But then when I got to thinking about it, the same attributes that make you successful in a venture like that also make you successful at home, in the community. It's a lot of relationship skills, which I'm sure you got from the book. So mindset. I mean, it's there's a lot that goes into it, and so I expanded it. And Steve, it took me 2 years to write the book initially, and then my oldest daughter got a hold of it and said, let me read this thing before you release it. And she had me kill a third of the book and rewrite it. So it's less businessy because she said, Dad, do you want retired people to read this? Do you want stay-at-home moms to read this? Do you want people in school to read this? I'm like, yeah, I do. And she said, then you've got to kill all this business networking stuff and you've got to make it more relatable to your, average person. And so hopefully I did that. You tell me, you read most of it.
Well, I think the idea of hitting total available market, the TAM, I think you definitely did the trick on that one because a lot of it, you hit on things like health. You hit on things like, as you said, relationships. You hit on, your mindset. And those things, whether you're in business as an entrepreneur, or whether you're a stay-at-home mom who's just looking at saying, I'm doing the most important job, which is looking after the family, those kind of situations, I think the book's applicable to every single one of those.
I appreciate that. Yeah, so if you were able to gather it from my book, I think it's really important to have your priorities straight, right? Some people, they just, like you said, work, they're just chasing the dollar. And that's not what I'm about. I mean, I know your podcast has the word money in it. Money is important. You need it to pay for things, but I put my faith first, my family second, my health and fitness third, and then after that, business. And so, I think you probably gathered from my book, I get up early in the morning and I knock out fitness, faith, fitness, family time. I spend time with my wife in the morning, go to the gym, and I keep my phone off until I start working. So I have a block of time in the morning that is for me and for my family, and it really sets me up for the day, right? I enter my day positive, upbeat, not thinking, oh, am I going to be able to get a workout in today? I've already knocked out a good portion of that.
That is so critically important. For me, I think Home Depot has a lot to teach us about time management. When you walk into the store of Home Depot and you see all the shelves, each one of those shelves is a slot in the store that has attributed value. And if we look at our calendar, like the shelves of Home Depot, if that is not producing the return we're looking for, then we need to pull whatever else we're putting in that slot and put something of high value. And what you're just saying is your inventory of stuff that's going on the shelves are saying, fitness is my inventory. Faith is my inventory. Family is my inventory. I don't know if there's any other F words we could put in there, but those are the three top ones there. And then we're looking at our finances is our next one, right? So it's our money, building our business. And so I think by organizing your calendar, like Home Depot organized their shelves, you can really get to the outcomes you're looking for.
That's exactly what I do. I block out time for the things that are important to me, and then I schedule the business in and around those other things. And I've done that. I've
Yeah,
done that
that's
even when I
beautiful.
was a full-time employee. I did that as well. I set boundaries. That was one of the sections in my book is setting boundaries. Because if you don't set boundaries, if you make yourself available 24/7, 365, people will take it from you. Your employer will take it from you. If you're helpful to other people, if you're a giver, not a taker, people will take all of your time. And so I like to be a giver, but I do it within the parameters that I set.
Absolutely. I was talking with a really successful mortgage broker in Canada, and he was talking, some client called him and said, hey, let's do a mortgage. The guy's like, great. He says, well, and he goes, well, can we do it on Saturday at 11 o'clock at night? And he looked and he said, would you ask, your doctor to meet with you Saturday at 11 o'clock at night? He says, no. Well, why do you think it's appropriate to do that with me? Oh, well, I just thought you might be available. No, here's my hours. Here's what I mean. Does that work for you? Oh, yeah, no, that's no problem. So I agree. Setting boundaries, I think, are so critically important. And real estate agents fall victim to this all the time because they'll just say yes to any time. And I agree with you that the idea of every yes is 1,000 no's. It's infinite no's, actually, for every yes.
I agree. I think I have lost business relationships because I've set up boundaries. Frankly, if somebody has to do something on a Saturday, they're probably not the right person for me. Lately I've set up Saturday as my day of rest. I work really hard. In fact, I'm back in the grind on Sunday afternoons. I'm chairman of the board of a company. I'm chairing a board meeting right after church on Sunday, and that's life, right? I mean, I guess we were given one day a week to rest, and I take mine and I unplug. I don't do any work related stuff on Saturday. At least not my normal work related stuff. If I want to pursue new things, have new, I get new ideas and new thoughts and new ways of doing things on Saturdays because I've unplugged, and it's great. I love it, and I think everybody would benefit by doing that. It doesn't have to be Saturday. It's just Saturday was the original Sabbath, so I said why not? Most people are unplugged on Saturdays.
Yeah, I'm sort of. I should say I'm this exact same way on Saturdays. I wouldn't even say, to be honest, if I was going to be truthful, it wasn't necessarily by design. It's just because it kind of happened that way. Because I am very structured about my week. I get up at 4:30. I go to the gym at 5, and then I do all my planning in the morning and do my team meetings. I try to get all that stuff done before 9:30, so then the rest of the day I can be in action. And then the evenings I schedule a couple more fitness stuff, and I schedule time with my family. So during the week it's very scheduled. And then Saturdays it just kind of happens that I just mentally disconnect on Saturdays maybe. And then Sunday I can feel myself starting to reconnect. And then Sunday nights I'm like, okay, what does my week look like? And I'm already getting engaged in Sunday nights, so I'm doing my prep work on Sunday nights. So I actually probably follow the same.
We have a lot of similarities. I go back to the gym in the evenings too. I've narrowed that down to four nights a week. I was doing 6, and it was a bit extreme. So I've kind of modified the workout schedule. So I typically get Tuesday off, and then Friday I do my cardio in the morning, but I'm not doing weights in the evening. So it's especially good in the summertime here because I live across the street from a resort, and they have an amazing pool bar, and I like to unplug Friday after work and go over and enjoy my surroundings.
Now, you're not counting the time at the pool bar as part of your workout exercise, correct?
No, I'm not. No, but I often will go with friends, and it's amazing some of the. It's still business, right? I mean, you don't have to be, doing email or in a Zoom meeting or a personal meeting. You can be hanging out at the pool bar and come up with amazing ideas. And some of those ideas were born at the pool bar. So
I think that's great. What you're really saying is you're going to an environment that's a relaxed environment with some intentionality as well. Is that you're going there to explore ideas, explore relationships, see what outcomes can happen, and if you're going there to, kind of party and get into that a different mindset, then that's kind of maybe not what you're looking for, but you're there to really build those relationships and see what the outcomes can happen.
Well,
I think
last week,
it's an interesting way. Yeah.
interesting. Last week, a friend of mine was supposed to go with me, and they couldn't come last minute. Something came up, and so I I grabbed a book and I brought it with me, and I realized this is even better than going with a friend. I mean, I because you don't need a friend to if you're in your book, it's essentially you're there with somebody to stimulate your mind. And so I actually had a great time. I sat at the bar for a little bit, then I broke away. I was into the book, and I sat off in the corner, and I just enjoyed the ambience of being there, and I think that I'm going to make that a thing this summer. I've got a reading list. I'm going to try to check off this summer. So if that sounds good to you, you can start with my book, right? It'll
That's
get you
right.
thinking about an abundant summer, abundant life.
The idea of the book, it's great when you look at my podcast, the money, the mindset, and the mentoring podcast. Obviously people always look at the first word. They don't look at the last word. The last word is the mentors. And I think when you look at books, the idea that you're spending time with that, it could be a mentor, and it could be a science fiction book. In the science fiction book, I read and I interviewed an author of a science fiction book with an AI background platform for the backstory on it. And it was amazing. It was a great book. And so the idea is that you're sitting down with a friend. Your friend is that mentor in that book, and they'll teach you maybe what to do or maybe what not to do.
Yeah, it's a really interesting idea. So I heard, I think it was Tucker Carlson talking about, he doesn't have a TV, and he was talking about how he reads. The guy doesn't drink and he doesn't have a television set, but he reads books. And he was talking about reading a book called Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. So I bought it. I figured, well, this guy ran, most of the known world at the time. And so I'm sitting down with a guy who lived some 2,000 years ago, and I'm learning from him, right? And so that's what and then I heard somebody else talking about a historian from that era called Josephus. So that's in my cart, So I'm going back to the ancient mindsets to get ancient wisdom. There's so much to learn from it.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at Socrates, you look at Aristotle, Rousseau, Henry David Thoreau, any of these ones, of whether the contemporaries or whether they're, we go back to the OGs, there's always something to pick out of them. And I think we can take a lot of those concepts and bring it forward. I mean, the philosopher warrior is something that I truly believe in, and that's a very old belief. And I think that to be holistic, and I think you talk a lot about that, is that the idea that you need to be of strong mind, you need to be a strong body, you need to be of strong faith and have strong family. And that really embodies that old school world of what a good person is supposed to be.
Yeah, I've learned so much from reading old texts. I mean, starting with the Bible, and then after reading the Bible, I went on to read the Quran, and not that I was looking for anything new. I just wanted to know what half of the world believes. And now that I know, I've been spending a lot of time in the Middle East, and the fact that I've taken time to read their book and I understand their mindset and their culture, it makes me so much more relatable to them when I talk with them. So I've developed a lot of friendships around being able to build bridges between the faiths and the cultures, and it's been great. Some of my best friends are in the Middle East now.
And that was one concept, is the idea of that you have a very strong belief in Christianity, and you have a lot of friends that are Middle Eastern who, obviously it's a Muslim background around the Quran. Talk to me about that integration when you talk about what are the similarities, what are the differences, and how can you see those bridges being built to be really strong?
Well, so the one thing that really struck me when I read the Quran was I had no idea what it said. Zero. I mean, the Muslims I knew were very secular, and they never talked about this stuff. So when I read it, and I read that they believe that Jesus was the Messiah, that he was born of the Virgin Mary, that he was the deliverer of the good news, that he was a performer of miracles. I mean, there was so much of it that was in there. They believe in all of the Old Testament prophets as well. And so when I read, there's some differing points as well, but there's more in common than there is different. And so they're both faiths are monotheistic faiths, both are Abrahamic faiths. So when you're the type of person who likes to find common ground with somebody, you can find a lot of common ground there. I do that politically as well, right? I'm not going to air my politics on here, but I'm somebody who likes to find common ground with people. What you probably read it in my book. One of the best friendships I built was a guy when I was politically active. I was working at the polls. I was working for one side, and the other guy was working for the other side, and we met volunteering, and we became friends. In fact, my son went to work for him on his farm, worked for him for like 8 years, and he wanted to try to indoctrinate my son into his way of thinking. And because of the friendship, because we had built trust with one another, I said, and my son was only 12 years old at the time. The gentleman's name was Malcolm Baldwin. He's passed away now, so I can talk about him. But he I said, Malcolm, I've had him for 12 years. Take your best shot. And then, I told my son, I said, Malcolm's a really smart guy. You better know why you believe what you believe, because he knows why he believes what he believes. And so you just can't say because my dad believes that. And so the two of them had the most incredible relationship over those 8 years, just talking about things of life. In fact, my son believes that we were created, not evolved. And Malcolm wanted to teach my son about evolution. He wanted to talk to him about the origin of the species. And I said, you know what? I'll buy him the book, Malcolm, by all means. And so, he learned so much from that experience. And I told my son, I said, if you ever want to be able to be effective in arguing your position, you need to be able to argue the other person's position just as strong as you would yours, so that
Yeah.
if you can't do that, then you're just going to be talking past each other. And so he's able to do that today because of that relationship. And so we end that relationship with, he was the keynote speaker at my son's Eagle Scout ceremony when he made Eagle Scout. And in fact, I attended his funeral a few years back, and it was really sad. I cried my eyes out because I was really sad to see that guy go. So that's when I talk about finding common ground, whether it be religious or political. I think the world would be a better place if everybody tried to do that.
I agree 100%. I think too many times what people are doing when they're having a conversation, they're spending too much time in the mechanism of convincing the other person and not listening to the other person. It's the idea of actively engaging in what they're saying and really saying, is that something that fits with who I am? Yes, maybe no. And if it's no, why? And then being able to accept that that person is probably going to their same reconciliation in their brain, and knowing that that's okay if that other person has a different belief than I do. As long as we're not trouncing at each other physically or financially or any other ways, then that's a whole different ballgame. But the idea is that we're going to accept the other person's. And I think we're both looking for a truth in the common ground rather than the truth in our perception of what we understand. I think it becomes a way better conversation when you're talking to somebody who's different than you. I have 100% belief that you need to surround yourself always with people who think differently than you.
I agree. Absolutely. Some of my best friends are the polar opposite of me, and I prefer to keep it that way. I don't want to be in an echo chamber.
Oh, it'd be the worst. If I surrounded myself with 50, it'd be awful. The world would.
I know. You earn your right to speak too. Like when I went to, I've been to Pakistan 3 times in the past 2 years, and the first time I went over there, I just listened. I didn't talk. I mean, I talked a little bit, but I didn't express any of my views or beliefs. I just listened and listened and listened, and it's amazing how people love to talk about what they value, and I learned a lot. And the next time I went back, I was actually invited to speak in front of thousands of people, and the topic I was challenged to speak on it was religious similarities and differences. Believe it or not, it was kind of a daunting thing to do in Islamabad. I'm in the capital of a Muslim country, and I'm speaking on this very sensitive topic, and I studied it carefully. I came prepared. I ran it by friends before I went to do it, and it came off really well. In fact, Steve, we're doing a podcast right now. I've been invited on more podcasts in Pakistan. It's crazy. I had to change my Facebook profile to a public figure profile because I was getting so many friend requests from that region that I couldn't answer them all. So that way they could just follow me rather than befriend me. So it's kind of crazy.
That's amazing. That's amazing. What's the biggest takeaway that you took out of being in those countries? When you say there's there's obviously similarities, but there's differences. When you look at the differences and you say what could you celebrate in those differences that you could take away and say it'd be great for other communities to take a look at and say that this is an interesting thing to bring in.
Well, there's so many different instances, and there's a spectrum, right? It's not, you just can't lump the whole, like Pakistan has 200 some odd million people. I mean, it's a big country, and then Saudi Arabia is the really the heart of Islam, right? And so, and Saudi Arabia is changing right now. They're in the early stages of changing, but they're, if you look at some of the other Middle Eastern countries, take Dubai, right? I mean, it's a very progressive society. I think Saudi is starting to move in that direction, and you start to see the changes over there. So you'll see the very conservative, traditional, covered people, but then you'll run into people, women especially, that are, look like they're from America because they're operating in freedom now. And so you see that in Pakistan as well. So it's a wide spectrum, and you just need to be very sensitive and respectful to their customs. So the one thing that you learn, Steve, is that when you go over there, you don't necessarily, like when you're interacting with a woman, for example, you don't necessarily stick out your hand to shake her hand as we would in the West. You wait and you see if she extends her hand, and if she does, then you can shake it. So you have the spectrum of people who will not shake hands, and there are people who will hug, right? I mean, so you just have to, you really have to kind of figure out where they are in the spectrum of conservatism in their culture, and adapt to it. There's something beautiful about it because their culture is so much more modest. I think we've taken it a little bit too far here in the West. So I kind of respect the modest nature of their culture. And if I were to bring my wife over there, she wouldn't wear the jeans that she wears here over there. I mean, I just don't think it would, especially not in Saudi Arabia. It's just different.
Mm. There was one thing I read about expressions, and when you look at expressions in somebody's eyes and that sort of thing, in a Middle Eastern country where they wear a lot of garb, the expression apparently that comes out of their eyes is so much more strong than when you look at somebody in North America where you get a full face perspective, that it actually speaks so much more because it's very focused in the way that they communicate with their eyes.
Yeah, the interesting thing is when you look at a woman when you can only see her eyes, and when you look at her eyes, you'll notice that her eyes are still done up. I mean, they have the makeup on their eyes, their eyelashes. I mean, you can really tell that there's a beautiful person inside there, right? And while
Mm.
in that culture, in that instance, that beauty is reserved for her husband or her dad or her brother, right? I mean, that's the limits of where that beauty is shared, or with their girlfriends, right? I mean, when they get with their girlfriends, all that stuff comes off, and you just have to respect that. In fact, I'm working with a woman. She may watch this. Who I met. In fact, I sat down and talked with her at a networking event because she had her face covered. Only her eyes were exposed, and everybody else in the room was just very Western looking. This was in Pakistan, in Lahore, and I went over to talk to her because she was sitting there alone, and lo and behold, she's somebody who is an expert at marketing, at building websites, at doing book campaigns of all things, right? Who would have known? And so it it is a little bit of a challenge to speak with her because I can't see her lips, and there's a little bit of a language barrier, but she's brilliant, and we're interacting back and forth daily now as she's putting up a
That's
website for me.
amazing.
And yeah, I mean, it's so I think if you just get out of your comfort zone, throw away the misconceptions, and just because somebody isn't exposing themselves doesn't mean there's not a brilliant, beautiful person back there. And I've learned
Yeah,
to look past all of that and see the beauty in those people. And yeah, I could only see her eyes, but I also could see her mind because she was speaking to me. And she sold me in the half hour, 40 minutes that we spoke.
that's amazing. I know with our gym, I go to a gym called Mass Academy up here in Cambridge, Ontario, in Canada, and they have a day that's dedicated for Muslim women that they shut the gym down completely. They only allow women in the gym so that they can go, they can train Muay Thai kickboxing, they can train Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, they can do whatever they want. And then they have that spot that's just reserved for them, no men, and it just works out extremely well. And I think, situations like that where you can integrate into an environment, a place that's inclusive, allows people to really, celebrate their culture. I think it's an amazing, amazing thing. It's a kudos to the gym owner for doing that, because I think it just shows where you can actually really create a space that people can allow them to be themselves in their way that they are in their community.
Well, the interesting thing is, and I've traveled extensively throughout the Middle East now. When you go to, there's certain places like Turkey where it feels very Western over there. It doesn't, so there's spectrums. But when you go into like the West Bank in Israel, you can't tell a Christian woman from a Muslim woman. They dress the same. It's really interesting. It's just part of that culture.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they're a religious Muslim or religious Christian, the cultural attire is very much the same. And so I don't necessarily look at somebody and say, oh, that must be a Muslim, or because oftentimes I was wrong. It's interesting.
That I just learned. So I didn't know that was the case. I've never been to the West Bank, so obviously I wouldn't have the experience. But that is something that I would never have known. Is it just because of the heat that they wear the head garb to cover them from the sun, or is it it's just a cultural norm in the area?
I just think thousands of years of culture, right? Some of the earliest Christians are there, and part of the tradition is a woman would have her head covered. So in the New Testament it says if you look at women have long hair. There was a reason for that from the Bible, and that was a head covering, right? So they probably do have the freedom to have their head uncovered, but it's just once again it's a spectrum. They take it a little further. I mean, you see nuns.
Mm-hmm.
Nuns cover their heads, right? I mean, it's part of that tradition.
Interesting. That is so interesting. Now, when you talk about, I'm going to go back to the book a little bit. We talked a little bit about, obviously well-being, about going out and doing crazy things like being out on your jet ski or working out every day, twice a day, those type of things for an abundance, for the well-being of the physicality. Let's talk about the well-being from a mindset perspective. I want to kind of delve into that a little bit more from your perspective.
Yeah, so the first thing I talk about in the book is finding your purpose. So many people go through life and just take whatever comes at them, and they don't really have a sense of purpose. And so I'm not going to take you through the whole chapter, but I go through how I found my purpose. My purpose found me, actually, and I talk about walking into that. And sometimes it's uncomfortable, right? I mean, public speaking was something that I was terrified to do, and I it's nothing I ever would have sought to do, but it kind of sought me out, and as I got in front of crowds and spoke, I would get that positive feedback that would come and say, that was good. You were good at that. I even had to speak at church a few times, which was terrifying because that's kind of a place of awesome responsibility. And most people don't go up and tell the pastor, how good sermon, pastor. But they came up to me and they told me, you were really good. And so I started to listen to that, because if I watched a video of myself talking, I thought I was horrible. But if people are taking that away from my talks, I must be doing something right. And so I've stepped into that, and I've spoken so many times in so many places now that it's just become part of what I do. Not that I necessarily seek it out, but I get invited to speak in foreign countries. I've spoken in Pakistan 3 times, and Saudi Arabia, and it's I'm in front of different cultures, different peoples. It's been really interesting. I talk about maintaining a sound mind. So many people just let whatever thoughts come into their mind, and they don't realize that the only person who can control what they think is them. And so I talk about how you can be purposeful about what goes into your mind, and how you program your mind, and how you think about your day. Your mind has amazing power. And then your spoken words put life into action. It's if you're constantly saying negative things over yourself, negative things are going to happen. if you're constantly smiling and saying positive things about yourself and your family members, positive things are going to happen. So 4 years ago, my wife and I started. This may seem, odd to some of your listeners, but it's something that we do. So I when I moved from Virginia to Texas, I had a lot of time in the car. It's 2 full days of driving, and so you run out of audio books and podcasts to listen to, and so it's a lot of time to listen to stuff. And I just started listening to sermons from random pastors, and I was just listening to lots of stuff. I made that trip 4 times, and so I got to thinking there is a lot of power in the words that you speak. And so a combination of all those messages and podcasts and things I listen to, I realized that God has promises that he's given to us in his word. And if we claim those promises out loud, we verbalize those promises, it puts those words into action. And so my wife and I have 5 lists of promises that are given to us, and we actually take time every morning to claim those things out loud together. We'll take turns, and the other will repeat it. It may seem silly, but I'm telling you, my life has changed over these 4 years as we put those words into action. And so whether it's the word of God or just positive affirmations, if you're putting those things into action through your thoughts and your words, your life follows. And so I walk through that in the book. There's even a diagram that shows how that works.
Yeah, the circle diagram.
Yeah, little workbook things at the end of each chapter that people have found helpful. I talk about, I give a precursor to the chapter on growing spiritually. If you have no interest in this, skip it. But if you're interested in this, I talk about my journey. I was an atheist for the first half of my life, right? And so I know what it's like to be that way, and I know what it's like to be the other way. And so I take the readers through that journey as well. And so there's a lot of other things I talk about with respect to relationships, and being a giver, not a taker, to thinking about the other person. The other thing I talk about in there, Steve, you might have seen, is that so many people are worried and anxious. They have anxious thoughts, and so what I have found is I'm a really happy guy. The reason I think I'm a really happy guy without any problems is I have 5 children. I have a wife. I'm constantly pouring myself into other people, and so I don't have time for problems. I'm not sitting like thinking about my toe that hurts, right? Or how I'm going to pay a bill or something. I don't worry about those things because I don't give myself time to do it. And so I give examples of things you can do, whether it's gardening or going and volunteering, feeding the homeless. If you're there helping that other person who's worse off than you, your mind is on that other person. It's not on you and whatever problems are plaguing you. And so I actually read a book that helped my thinking in that. It was called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, by Dale Carnegie. And so a lot of that philosophy came from that. He was a fabulous writer, wrote 2 of my favorite books. The other one was How to Win Friends and Influence People. So my book is kind of like a next generation How to Win Friends and Influence People, if I had to put it in a category.
I think a lot of the books that have been written are always built on the shoulders of giants. And I think that to always give homage to the person who you could grab the baseline content from, I just think is really important. I think John Maxwell and Brandon Dawson, they talk about the same sort of thing around what you're saying, which is what you think is what you say is what you do, and what you do becomes your legacy. And I think what you just did by design or by happenstance, you actually said it actually happens in the opposite as well when you start talking about anxiety, because what you do becomes what you say, and what you say becomes what you think. So it actually can feed back on the cycle in the opposite way. You're sort of reaffirming those thoughts to say that those thoughts are positive thoughts. Because if you're anxious but you're doing something, then that's going to reduce your anxiety. We're saying that the doing is actually going to help with the thinking. But if the thinking then is also going to help with the doing, I mean, this is an ecosystem here.
Yeah, and it works that way in the physical as well. I mean, I am not programmed to get up out of neither are you probably. Just naturally you don't want to get up and go exercise. Right? We'd rather stay in bed and eat potato
chips.
Well,
I do.
Right?
I got to go choke people. That's my version of exercise. So I'm excited.
I have programmed myself to go do it, whether I feel like doing it or not. I I walk across the street over to the gym, and I'm there. I'm on that elliptical for a half hour every morning. I do my stretches afterwards. I mean, I do it, and I think I told you, Steve. I also I don't end it there, and I don't write about this in the book, right? I'm giving you kind of the extremes. In the book, I talk about the basics of just figuring out how to not continue to gain 10 pounds every so many years. I mean, it's most people gain a pound a year after the age of I forget what it is, like after 30. You just start gaining, and
Mm.
everybody says they want to lose weight, and then they'll do these yo-yo diets where they'll bounce back and forth, and that's most of the Western world. I I don't do that. I have figured out a lifestyle that works for me, and I enjoy it, right? And so I do work on a treadmill desk. My goal is to walk 10 miles a day while I'm working if I'm not in an office on a client site. And I walked 15 miles yesterday. I mean, I wasn't even thinking about it. I was busy. My mind was busy. And I was just moving the whole day. And so that's a lot of calories to burn, right? I mean, so by Saturday I have a cheat day, and like you, Steve,
Mm.
I knock out those workouts. I do these things just because I've trained myself to do them, no matter how I feel. And every time after I'm done with that workout, all those endorphins that come into your mind, that's another, it relates back to the mind, because I'm on what they call a runner's high after doing my exercise, and my mind is positive, and I'm ready to I'm like actually excited about doing my work.
Absolutely. When I finish jujitsu, or even when I'm during jujitsu, what happens is I consider jujitsu. I mean, it is a workout. There's no question about it. But I consider jujitsu my meditation, because when I'm in a rolling situation, I can't be thinking about, what clients do I have to meet today, or, what's going on with my kid's life, or, what's going on with, my wife, or any of these things. I can't think about any of that stuff. It gives me this single-minded purposeness that happens in that moment. And, John Danner, who's down in your area, he talks about jujitsu helps you make decisions under stress, because it's a highly stressful situation. And then you learn that you always go to your lowest form of training in jujitsu, and all your job is just to keep on increasing your lowest form of training, not your highest, but your lowest. And so for me, it's a meditation just as much as it is a physical moment. And then you're right at the end of it, you get this endorphin dump that, like, your body's vibrating, and you're covered in sweat, you're just exhausted, but man, you feel like you're on top of the world. When you're taking a step as you're walking down the street after that really killer workout, like nothing could break you at that moment.
Yeah, I did jujitsu as a kid. I loved it. I had the guy who taught it to me was a guy named David Windsor. He was a kinesiologist. So
Mm.
part of the jujitsu lesson was a classroom on kinesiology, why the wrist flex worked, and he would take you to the anatomy of the bones, right? And so he would break down
Mm.
every move and show the science behind it. It was fascinating, and he combined that with Shotokan, karate, Kodokan, judo, and kung fu. So it was the coolest martial art ever, and I enjoyed that time so much. Unfortunately, David Windsor passed away, and he only produced one black belt, and it was a guy named Glenn who really didn't carry it on, and so I kind of fell away
Oh,
from it when he passed away, but really really enjoyed that time. So I get it.
what a beautiful blend of martial arts. That's the one thing I love about mixed martial arts, is it used to always be which is the best martial art. And if you look at UFC 1, it was all about, we're going to take this martial art against this martial art. And then what everybody realized is that if you took a hybrid of all of them, you can become the best martial artist, because judo is going to teach you certain mechanisms of control that Brazilian jiu-jitsu is not going to, and it's throws. And wrestling will teach you a certain grit that comes through wrestling and takedown defense. And then Muay Thai will have certain karate, taekwondo. They all bring something to the game, and it makes so interesting when you can kind of watch somebody. Okay, that came from there, and that came from there. When you're watching something like the UFC, I love it. I love the new modern sport of MMA.
Well, this guy David Windsor, he had a stroke. He was a young guy, and it's too bad that he had all these problems. But so half of his body was paralyzed, and right, so people would always think they could sneak up on him, play tricks on him, but he had the most deadly right hand in the world. I mean, he really couldn't do the kicks and so forth because of his left side. But man, if that right hand if that right hand ever got you, good luck, you know.
That's
He
amazing.
could put
That's
you in a wrist
amazing.
flex and have you immobilized so fast.
Just doing wrist locks on people yesterday. I
Yeah, and
love
he was a
massage.
master at using the other person's energy against him, right? Somebody would come at him, and he would just have the energy just go right around, and next thing you know, you're on the ground. It was amazing.
Well, I think jujitsu, there's a lot that can be taken from jujitsu as a mentality into the way that you communicate with somebody. Because the idea is if somebody puts forth an argument, rather than combating that argument, work with them in the direction that they're going to help adjust the trajectory of the discussion to get to the point in which you want to take them. And I think that when you're having a conversation, you can have such a more productive conversation rather than the yes, no combat that happens in a lot of conversations with people who are just trying to prove that they're right rather than prove what the truth is. And I think that's where, it goes back to the idea of bringing people together that I think you're so good at doing.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think most of the I don't want to lose people with the martial arts stuff. Joe Rogan does that sometimes, but I don't think most people understand kind of the art of jujitsu. It's most of martial arts it's combative, right? You're hitting and hitting, or kicking or throwing or holding. Jujitsu is the opposite of that. It's taking that big strong person who's coming at you with that punch and taking that punch and making it work against them. It's really amazing when I'm sure I've lost most of that, but it was really an amazing thing because the being big and strong. I'm not that big. I'm a little bit strong, but there's always somebody bigger and stronger. It didn't really matter with jujitsu because you could use that big person's size and strength against them, which is what was really cool about it.
Absolutely. Well, and longer too. You can last longer. I mean, if they're spending their energy and you're not, like that, I'm 48 years old, and a lot of guys in the gym are like in their 30s and their 20s, and I can outlast most of them. Just because I'm efficient with the way that I move. It doesn't mean I can beat all of them. I mean, we've got some good killers in the gym, but I can keep up with pace all day, every day because I'm efficient in the way that I move because I
Well,
want to have them spend the energy.
let's see if Mike Tyson can do that this summer, right? I'm looking
Oh,
really forward to that.
I'm
His,
hoping that when he fights that he comes in with the old Mike Tyson mentality, but the new like physicality. Like he was so unstoppable. But he has to understand where he's at, physically as well. And, when you watched his last fight, I would just say he's got to show up better than he did the last fight.
yeah, he's fighting somebody 30 years younger than him. It's nuts. So
Yeah,
it'll
I know.
be
He was at Grant Cardone's Growth Con and he was talking about it, and he has the strong belief he's going to win. So
yeah, it'll be fun.
let's see what happens.
We're all gonna watch.
I always
But it's
think
not
most people,
jujitsu.
I heard this. No, it's definitely not jujitsu. Well, most people, I mean, they always say they talk about the goals and that sort of thing, that the goals and the motivation is so important. But I think, I heard this once where they said all these people who line up at the, on the line of a 100-meter dash, they all have the same goals, which is to come in first place. But the person who's the best systems, the best processes, the best, sometimes DNA is the person who's going to get to the goal line first and get that first prize. So it's not about goals. They all have the top goal, but it's about everything else that happens to actually recognize that goal. And
Yeah,
I hope for Mike Tyson that he's got that too.
I think most of the world's rooting for him.
Yeah, I think so too. Now, one of the things I want to talk about too is when we talk about bringing people together, you shared with me a clip of a event that you were at that you, I think, either run or participate at. That's the Sunday SVC thing that you're doing, where you had some really interesting characters on stage with some really interesting backgrounds. And when you're talking about that, hey, you weren't a public speaker, well, I would obviously that clearly argue against that case because you did a great job of interviewing people who had very different backgrounds. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that event? Because I just thought it was a cool event, and I thought I'd just bring it up.
Sure. Yeah, that's one of the motivations for coming here to Austin was to start this thing called the Sunday service. Yeah, we say SVC just not to make it sound like going to church because it's not. It's we've taken kind of the best of South by Southwest, film, music, business, panels, and we've done a faith version of it, but in a very cool, fun way. We take out Stubbs, which is an iconic place in Austin, and we do. The last one was 2 days, so I got it kicked off 2 years ago. We had 4,000 people the first time, 5,800 people the second time came, and throughout the 2 days, and so did this panel called, it was kind of a redemption panel. We called it the Second Chances panel. And I got three of the people who had come the furthest, right? Like I had a former gang member, Johnny Chan. He was in jail for 4 years in L.A. Marcus Bullock, who was in jail for, I want to say he was in for 8 years, maximum security at age 15 for doing an armed carjacking. And I had Brittany De La Mora, who spent 7 years in the porn industry as a porn actress. And all of them have given their life to the Lord, are doing wonderful things, helping other people. Brittany's got this amazing ministry. She's one of my favorite, kind of online, faith people. Marcus is running a business, and he's in helping inmates, and Johnny's going around doing this jail ministry, and they're really amazing people, nice people, and for them to talk about where they came from and how their life has changed and what they're doing now. That was a really fun panel. I don't know if you could put a link in your podcast
Yeah, I'll
there,
definitely put a
but
link onto it because I think it was a great conversation. That's for sure.
yeah,
And I just thought you navigated it very well.
yeah. I mean, there was so much. I could have taken any one of them and talked to them for 2 hours because they all have so much content, and so kind of to get the best of the best out of each of them, and get them talking with each other. So at the beginning of this, I knew Marcus. Marcus and I are friends. I didn't really know Brittany. I mean, I followed her and we interacted through Instagram, but I didn't know her. And then Johnny, I didn't know at all. And so I got them together on a Zoom call ahead of time where I really got them talking to each other and getting to know each other. And then at the event, this is part of the magic, Steve, of having that thing come off the way it is, because by the time we did it, we all had relationships with each other. So we sat back, for half a day backstage and just talked with each other and shared. And so, we were friends by the time we got up on the stage. We didn't know each other that long, but we knew what each other was about. And so I consider them all friends now. It's really good people. So it's a lot of fun. That was one of the most fun things I've done ministry wise. I mean, it was so on the edge. The first year I wanted to do that, but we were trying to get the church community in Austin behind this event. And I didn't want to spook off any of the pastors because it was kind of edgy, right? I mean, you're talking about somebody who's still got, I've never seen it, but they still have their porn career somewhere out there on the internet, right? I mean, that's kind of an edgy thing to do, but I know her heart. I know she's redeemed. She's completely changed her life. She's been out of that for a long time. She's married to a wonderful guy and has kids and is a great mom. And so, and is working against that industry now. I mean, she really is one of the most outspoken people against all of that. And so by the second year, after we had a successful event the first year, I felt like I got my sea legs under me and I could go and do something a little on the edge. And so if I'm allowed to, now we've got a big committee working on this thing. So it's not my event. I'd like to push the envelope even further. So I have fun doing that.
That's amazing. Well, one of the things that we were doing at the very beginning, it was of even just setting this conversation up was like, I said, well, how do I introduce you? And I'm like, Carl Grant the third. And then we were like, Carl Grant. Well, because my son's we would just go Carl Grant. And so I said, what are we going to be? And they're going to be, well, are you the person with that company that's coming up with solving some biological problems? We'll just leave it at that. Or are you the person who's, working with that legal company? Are you this? And it was just like, we're just going to get into it. But then, after having the conversation now and after sort of kind of bringing it a full circle is I go back to the very beginning. What I wrote is that you're really just a super connector. Like you're a person who just does a super job at connecting with people and then connecting people with people. And I think that just sort of, if it comes through everything that you've been doing, I think if that would be the title, it would be a super connector.
I accept that, Steve. It's kind of what I do. Even as chairman of the board of that life sciences company, if you think about it, so I'm chairman of the board of a life sciences company that is curing previously thought incurable diseases. We'll just leave it at that. I don't want to go into what exactly we're doing, but it's amazing stuff. And so in order to do what we've done, I've had to bring together a patent, right? Like I got patent work done pro bono. I had to bring together a CEO. I had to bring together a board. I had to bring together financing. I had to bring together all these pieces. And so it's not all me doing it, but I'm kind of the connective tissue that brought all of these things together. And I'm continuing to do that. I'm bringing the human trials. I've got two different human trial scenarios that we can do. I'm going out and I'm raising more money for that. So it's all about connecting. What we haven't talked about, Steve, is what I do for pay, right? I mean, it's kind of boring when you think about it, right? I
You
mean,
forgot about that part.
yeah, but but who's defined by what they do, right? I mean, I have
That's
had
right.
people in my life that you don't even know what they do because they're just interesting people, and so I try to be one of those people, right? Yes, I was global head of business development for a law firm for 20 years, right? I helped grow the revenue from 310 million to over 2 billion in revenue. So I know how to do that. That takes a certain skill set. And so I'm doing that on a consulting basis now, helping law firms optimize their marketing and business development departments, training people on how to do business development. I'm actually doing some business development for a firm here in Austin. So yes, bringing in legal work, that once again, it's connecting. It's bringing together entrepreneurs with sources of capital, with attorneys, and putting it all together. And so, yeah, I mean, you can take that and apply that to accounting work, to investment banking, to capital raising, to whatever. I mean, the whole world is built on relationships. It's one of the things I talk about in the book, right? People like to do business with people they know and trust. People governments like to do business with people they know and trust, right? Because I'm starting to travel in those circles where I know princes and prime ministers and ambassadors, and you know what? I know this guy from that country who and I'm able to make these connections now, and I don't know where it's all leading, but it's really an interesting circle to be playing in, especially with like Middle Eastern leaders now. It's a really,
That
really interesting world.
absolutely.
And there's so much
Well,
happening there in that part of the world now. So you don't know. I'm a peacemaker, right? I mean, that's what I'm looking for, commonality. What do we have in common? What can we agree on? So who knows where those skills could come into being? I look at a guy like Richard Branson. I was on his island last year for this group called Forming Impact. There's a guy who's built a structure there on his island to host like leaders of foreign nations to come and like end wars or end apartheid. I mean, that's he and I are very different, but I love I love the type of person he is, right? He's the type of person I want to do business with because he's got good in his heart, right? And there's people like that sprinkled throughout the world. I call them people of peace.
well, I love his concept of, and I read this once where he said, when somebody joins your organization, train them on everything that they could set up, shop next door, and they could compete against you, but then build a culture that they don't want to. And that to me is just, it's brilliant. And I would definitely say that that's in alignment with my core values.
Yeah. Well, you and I are very, very much alike, Steve. It's great to get to know you.
Man, you know what? My dreams are to get to where you're at today. I'm 10 years behind you, so I got a little bit of catch up. I'm only at 48, so I'll catch up in that way. And if I could lay a legacy like you've been doing, I'd feel like I've achieved at that point as well. So I give you all the credit in the world for the things that you've done and the impact that you make in the world, and continue to make that impact and get out there and continue to bring peace. And continue to bring connections, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you're getting up to in the next few years.
I think you're well on your way. I think you're the Joe Rogan of Canada.
Thanks, man. Well, hopefully my jiu-jitsu will get as well as his, and I really appreciate that. I'll take that as a humble thank you. So,
well,
Carl,
really
it's been definitely a pleasure chatting with you. And guys, this is the money, this is the mindset, this is the mentoring podcast. We'll see you on the next one.